The tires of Terence's black SUV crunched against the gravel as he pulled into the driveway of his mansion. The late summer sun dipped low, casting golden streaks against the wide front windows. He had been away for weeks, business trips, long hours, endless airports. But tonight, finally, he was home. Only, something felt off. Two police cruisers sat quietly at the curb, their lights flashing softly, like restless predators waiting to pounce. The blue and red glow danced across his lawn, painting the mansion in uneasy shadows. Terence slowed the car, confusion tightening in his chest. Why were cops here? He parked and stepped out, rolling his shoulders, exhausted but alert. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and hot asphalt, but there was a thickness to it, an unspoken tension that made his skin prickle. That's when he saw them, two uniformed officers walking toward him with cautious expressions, hands near their belts. They didn't look relieved to see him. They looked suspicious. "Evening, sir," the taller one said. His tone was polite, but firm, rehearsed. "Can we help you?" Terence blinked. "Help me?" He gestured at the house towering behind him. "This is my home." "What's going on?" The officers exchanged a quick glance, the kind that said, "We already decided what you were before you opened your mouth." "We got a call," the second officer explained. "A resident reported a suspicious individual attempting to break in. Matches your description." The words hit Terence like ice water. He let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Matches my description? I've lived here for years. I own this place." But the officers didn't look convinced. One of them placed a hand on his holster, as if Terence's very presence was a threat. "Sir, can we see some ID?" Neighbors had gathered across the street now, clustering together like vultures circling over fresh drama. He could feel their stares pressing into him, curiosity mixed with judgment, whispers flickering between them like sparks. "They don't see me as the homeowner. They see me as an intruder." Terence reached for his wallet slowly, carefully, aware of every twitch in the officer's posture. His fingers shook, not from guilt, but from rage. He handed over his driver's license, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. The taller officer studied it, glanced back at the house, then back at Terence. Doubt lingered in his eyes, but not enough to apologize. "This checks out," he muttered, almost reluctantly. Terence stepped past them, heart hammering. Something in his gut told him this wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't just an overzealous neighbor. There was a reason the cops had been called. As he slid the key into his own front door, that uneasy tension snapped into certainty. Someone didn't want him here. And worse, someone had been inside. The front door creaked as Terence pushed it open, but before he could step inside, the officers stopped him again. "Hold up, sir," one of them said sharply. His hand hovered near his holster again, his stance stiff. Terence froze, anger bubbling in his chest. "I told you, this is my house. What's the problem now?" The shorter officer adjusted his hat, scanning the porch like he was assessing a crime scene. "The caller said this property was abandoned. Said a man matching your description was seen trying to enter. We're just doing our job." Terence turned slowly, his eyes locking on the small crowd of neighbors across the street. Shadows of folded arms, shaking heads, and cell phones recording the scene. Every pair of eyes told the same story: he doesn't belong here. Abandoned? His house? His jaw tightened. "Do I look like I'm breaking in? I drove into my own driveway. With my garage remote. My license proves this is my address. What else do you need?" The taller officer hesitated. His eyes darted toward the neighbors, then back to Terence, as if their whispers carried more weight than the ID in his hand. "You've been gone a while, haven't you?" the officer asked. Terence's stomach dropped. How would they know that? He'd been traveling for weeks, yes, but his home was still his. His bills were paid, his name was on every record. Yet somehow, his absence had become ammunition against him. He stepped forward, forcing calm into his voice. Yes, I've been away for work. But that doesn't make my house fair game. The shorter officer's tone sharpened. Sir, calm down. We're just trying to figure out what's going on. Calm down. The words burned. They always said that when what they meant was don't make us see you as dangerous. Terence raised his hands slightly, palms open, showing restraint. Inside, though, his fury grew with every second. He turned his head again toward the crowd, and that's when he saw her. Karen. Standing on her porch, arms crossed, chin lifted with self-importance. Her phone was still in her hand, her smug expression betraying the truth. She had called them. Her voice rang out across the lawn, dripping with disdain. Officers, are you sure this man is supposed to be here? That house has been empty for weeks. We've been worried about trespassers. The crowd murmured, emboldened by her words. Terence felt his fists tighten at his sides. He took a step closer to the officers, his voice low but cutting. That woman is lying. I've lived here for years. I have the deed, the keys, the paperwork. What she's doing, what you're letting happen, is harassment. The taller officer shifted uncomfortably. He knew Terence was right, but the weight of the crowd and Karen's false confidence made him hesitate. The shorter officer finally muttered, "We'll need to check inside. Just to be sure everything is as you say." Terence turned back toward his front door, slipping the key into the lock. His pulse raced. He didn't know what he would find beyond that door, but one thing was certain. This wasn't just about suspicion anymore. This was war. The key turned with a familiar click, but when Terence pushed the door open, the air inside hit him like a wave, warm, lived in, wrong. His house smelled of perfume. Not his. Not anything he recognized. He stepped across the threshold, the officers close behind, their boots squeaking against his polished floors. His chest tightened as his eyes swept the foyer. The rug had been shifted, as if someone had dragged a suitcase across it. He moved deeper inside, past the grand staircase he'd saved years to afford, into the living room. That's when he saw it. A pair of pink flip-flops sat neatly by the couch. His heartbeat thundered. He didn't wear flip-flops. No one he trusted had a key. He bent down, touched them with his fingertips. They were warm. Recently worn. "Sir," the officer behind him said, cautious. "You expecting someone here?" Terence's jaw flexed. "No. This is my house. No one else should be here." He walked into the kitchen, the polished marble counters gleaming under the evening light. 2 wine glasses rested in the sink, faint lipstick stains curling around their rims. A bottle of cheap red sat half empty on the counter. He gripped the edge of the sink, fury climbing up his throat. Someone had been living here. Eating, drinking, making themselves comfortable like it belonged to them. The shorter officer muttered, "Place doesn't look abandoned to me." Terence spun, eyes narrowing. "Exactly. Because I live here. Whoever called you," he jabbed a finger toward the front yard, toward where Karen still stood smirking, "they've been lying." But then came a sound that froze the room. A door upstairs. Closing. Soft, deliberate. The officers stiffened. Terence's body went rigid. His mansion wasn't empty. Without waiting, he bolted toward the staircase, his shoes pounding against the steps. "Hey!" he shouted. "Who's in my house?" The officers scrambled after him, hands at their weapons. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched long and quiet. He moved down it, his breath sharp, adrenaline pumping. One by one, he flung open doors. Guest room, empty. Office, empty. Then, the master bedroom. The door creaked open, revealing the faint glow of a lamp. Clothes, women's clothes, were draped across his bed. A suitcase lay unzipped on the floor, spilling blouses and toiletries. The smell of perfume hung heavier here, cloying, invasive. Terence's voice cracked with rage. "What the hell?" Behind him, one officer whispered. Looks like someone's been staying here. The bathroom door clicked. Terrence's head snapped toward it just as it opened. And there she was. Karen. Wearing his silk robe. Her hair wrapped in a towel, her expression cool, almost annoyed at the intrusion. The silence stretched thick, broken only by the officer's stunned breaths. Karen raised a brow, her voice sharp and condescending. "Oh, it's you. Took you long enough to come back." Terrence's entire body trembled, not from fear, but from rage. She hadn't just called the cops on him. She'd been living in his mansion. The room seemed to tilt. Terence gripped the doorframe, steadying himself, his blood roaring in his ears. Karen, his neighbor, the same woman who'd stood on the lawn pretending to protect the neighborhood, was standing in his bedroom. In his robe. The taller officer broke the silence first, voice uncertain. "Ma'am, do you live here?" Karen laughed. Not nervously, not apologetically, bold, confident. "Of course I do. This house has been abandoned for weeks. The community couldn't just let it fall apart. Someone had to take care of it." Her tone dripped with entitlement, as if she were doing him a favor. Terrence's fists clenched. "Take care of it? You're squatting in my house. Drinking my wine. Sleeping in my bed. And then you had the nerve to call the police on me?" Karen tilted her head, smirking. "You were gone. Nobody knew when, if, you were coming back. And frankly, the neighborhood deserves better than a vacant mansion attracting trouble." I stepped up. The shorter officer's brow furrowed. "Ma'am, this isn't your property. If his name's on the deed—" She cut him off sharply, her voice rising. "Deeds can be faked. People disappear all the time. For all you know, he's the trespasser here." Gasps rippled from the hallway. Neighbors had crept inside, recording with their phones, feeding on the drama. Terence turned, seeing their wide eyes and sly smiles. They wanted a show. They wanted to see him humiliated. He whipped back to Karen, his voice low but dangerous. "Do you know what you've done? This isn't some HOA dispute about fences or garbage cans. You broke into my home. You lived here. That's a crime." Karen's smirk faltered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly, folding her arms. "Good luck proving it. The HOA knows me. They trust me. And frankly, they don't trust you." The words sliced through him. There it was, the unspoken truth. This wasn't about a vacant house. It was about him. A black man in a wealthy, white-dominated neighborhood. They'd rather believe her than him, even when he stood in his own home. The taller officer shifted uncomfortably. "We'll need to see proof of ownership, sir." Terrence's eyes burned with fury. He yanked out his wallet, his hand steady despite the storm inside. He slapped his driver's license onto the dresser, the address matching the home. Then, with a growl, he pulled out the folded copy of his deed he always carried when traveling. Paranoia turned wisdom. "Here. Read it. My name. My signature. My house." The officers exchanged a glance. One of them nodded slowly. "It checks out." Karen's expression cracked, but only for a second. Then she let out a dramatic sigh, rolling her eyes. "Fine. If he wants to play it that way. But this isn't over. The HOA has rules. And rules matter." Terence stepped forward, his voice like ice. "No, Karen. This is over. Pack your things. Tonight." The room fell into a tense silence. Everyone knew it wasn't really over. This was only the beginning. For a brief, glorious second, Terence thought she would back down. But Karen didn't move. She didn't reach for her suitcase. She didn't head for the door. Instead, she sat down on the edge of his bed. His bed. Crossing her arms like she owned the place. "I'm not going anywhere tonight," she said coolly, her voice loud enough for the crowd of neighbors to hear. This house has been neglected for weeks. The HOA supported me stepping in. And until the board says otherwise, I have every right to be here. Murmurs rippled through the hallway, the neighbors whispering, phones still pointed like weapons. Some looked entertained. Some looked uneasy. But none spoke up for Terence. The shorter officer shifted awkwardly. "Ma'am, he has documentation. You can't just." Karen snapped, "Do you want a lawsuit? Because that's what you'll get if you throw me out without proper HOA authorization." Terrence's jaw dropped. HOA authorization? Since when did a homeowners association outrank the law? He stepped closer, voice sharp, controlled. "Karen, you're trespassing. You've stolen my home. You called the cops on me. And now you think you can bully your way out of this because the HOA likes you?" Her eyes glittered. "Not likes me. Trusts me. You're barely here. Half the board has been complaining about your absence, about how your yard wasn't being kept up. Someone had to act." Terrence's fists trembled at his sides. He had worked years, decades, to buy this house, to escape exactly this kind of judgment. And yet here he was, standing in his own bedroom, treated like an intruder. The taller officer sighed, rubbing his temple. "Look! We can't drag her out tonight. This is turning into a civil matter. You'll need to file trespassing charges in court." Terrence's mouth went dry. "You're telling me that after finding this woman in my robe, in my house, drinking my wine, you can't remove her?" The officer met his eyes with a weary look. "The paperwork matters. The process matters. You want her gone? File it officially. Otherwise, if we touch her, her lawyer will claim harassment." Karen smirked. She leaned back on his pillows, making herself comfortable. "See? The law is on my side." Something inside Terence snapped. He stormed forward, ripping the robe off the bedpost, yanking it out of her reach. "This is not your house, Karen. Not your robe. Not your life. You want to test me? Fine. But you just declared war." The neighbors gasped, some whispering, "He's really going to fight her." Karen smiled, almost triumphant, as if she had wanted this outcome all along. "Good. Because I'm not leaving. And the HOA will back me up. Let's see who the neighborhood believes, me or you." The cops exchanged helpless glances before retreating downstairs, already radioing in a report. And Terence stood frozen, watching as Karen picked up a book from his nightstand, opened it casually, and ignored him like he didn't exist. She wasn't just squatting. She was staking her claim. The next morning, Terence woke to the sound of voices outside his window. He hadn't slept, how could he, with Karen down the hall acting like she owned the place? Every creak of the floorboards reminded him that an intruder was in his home, under his roof. Pulling back the curtains, he saw them. A small crowd of neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, murmuring like it was a Sunday morning coffee klatch. Phones in hand, heads tilted, eyes all fixed on his mansion. Karen stood among them now, freshly dressed, her hair neatly styled, as if she were hosting a garden party rather than trespassing. And she was smiling. Terence stepped onto the porch, jaw tight. "What the hell is this?" Karen raised her voice so everyone could hear. "Good morning. We were just discussing the community's concerns. The HOA board had an emergency call last night. And given your long absence, they're questioning whether your residency here is still in good standing." Terence felt the words slam into him like a brick. Good standing? I pay my dues. I pay my taxes. I own this home. Karen's lips curved into a polite, poisonous smile. Ownership isn't just about money. It's about commitment, presence, contribution. And frankly, Terence, the HOA feels abandoned. This neighborhood needs responsible residents, people who are actually here. The crowd murmured in agreement. Some nodded, some avoided his eyes. It was clear, Karen had been whispering in their ears for 2 weeks, planting seeds, turning suspicion into consensus. One man from the group spoke up. "We've seen her maintaining the place, cutting the grass, keeping watch. You weren't around. The house could have fallen into disrepair." Terrence's voice hardened. "So that justifies breaking and entering? Drinking my wine? Sleeping in my bed? That's what you're defending?" Karen put on a wounded expression, pressing a hand to her chest. "I never stole. I safeguarded. This community matters to me. It's more than just a house, it's a home, and homes shouldn't sit empty." The hypocrisy burned. This wasn't about safeguarding. It was about power. Control. Karen was playing Queen Bee, and the HOA was her hive. Terence pointed a finger at her, his voice low but firm. "You crossed a line. And when this goes to court, no HOA vote, no whisper campaign, no smug little speech will protect you." Karen's smile thinned, but she didn't back down. Instead, she turned to the neighbors, her voice soft, reasonable. "You see? Aggressive. Confrontational. This is why I had to call the police last night. He makes people feel unsafe." Gasps fluttered through the crowd. A few neighbors stepped back, as if distance could shield them from the tension. Phones lifted higher, capturing every word, every expression. Terence felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on him. He wasn't just fighting for his house anymore. He was fighting against a narrative, one Karen was crafting, one the HOA seemed ready to believe. And for the first time, he realized the truth. This wasn't a squatter problem. It was a neighborhood war. Terence had never set foot in the county courthouse with such a burning purpose. Papers in hand, jaw locked, he moved through the corridors like a man possessed. The sleepless night, the whispers of the neighbors, Karen's smug smile as she turned his own community against him, it all fueled him now. The clerk behind the counter glanced up as he dropped the paperwork onto the desk. "Trespassing. Unlawful occupation. Theft. I want her out of my house," Terence said flatly. The clerk blinked, flipping through the forms. "Do you have proof of ownership?" Terence slapped down a thick folder, mortgage documents, tax receipts, utility bills, photos of the deed. He was overprepared, and he wanted them to know it. "Sir," the clerk said carefully, "this may take time. Squatter cases, they're complicated. Especially when an HOA is involved." The words made Terence's stomach churn. Complicated. Of course. Karen wasn't just trespassing, she was weaponizing bureaucracy, hiding behind the HOA's veil of authority. Still, the charges were filed. A court date was set. For the first time in days, Terence felt like progress was possible. But when he returned home, reality slapped him again. Karen was on the front lawn, chatting with neighbors as if she were the hostess of a Sunday brunch. A folding table stood between them, covered with fresh muffins and coffee carafes. Kids ran across the grass, laughing. She had staged a community gathering on his property. Terence stopped at the edge of the driveway, his voice sharp. "What the hell is this?" Karen turned, radiant in a pastel dress, the picture of suburban grace. "A neighborhood breakfast. We thought it would be nice to bring people together, especially after last night's unpleasantness." "You mean after you broke into my house?" Terence snapped. Karen didn't flinch. She only smiled wider, speaking loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Or after you shouted at your neighbors, made threats, and embarrassed yourself in front of the whole community?" Murmurs rippled again. Eyes turned on him, judging, skeptical. Terence clenched his fists. "I've filed charges. You won't be here much longer." Karen's expression shifted just slightly, cool, confident, unbothered. "We'll see. Until then, the HOA has authorized me to continue caretaking. They'd rather a house be cared for than abandoned." Terence stared at her, stunned. "Caretaking? You're drinking my wine, wearing my robe, sleeping in my bed." Karen laughed lightly, shaking her head. Dramatic as ever. You see, everyone? This is exactly the hostility I've been warning you about. He can't even have a calm conversation without yelling. The neighbors exchanged looks, some nodding, others filming. The narrative was slipping further out of Terence's hands. But deep inside, he reminded himself of one truth: paper trails don't lie. Court dates can't be faked. And when the judge saw the proof, Karen's little charade would crumble. For now, though, he was trapped in a grotesque performance, Karen playing the gracious hostess, the neighbors playing her audience, and him cast as the villain in his own home. But the stage would shift soon. Because next time, it wouldn't be a street gathering. It would be a courtroom. The HOA clubhouse smelled faintly of coffee and cheap carpet cleaner. Terence sat stiffly at the long oak table, his folder of documents clutched like a weapon. Around him, board members shuffled papers, sipping from styrofoam cups. Their faces were guarded, unreadable. At the far end sat Karen, radiant and self-assured, as though this were her coronation. She wore a cream blazer, hair perfectly styled, pearls glinting under the fluorescent lights. Every so often she leaned toward a board member, whispering, smiling, connecting. The HOA president, an older man with silver hair, cleared his throat. We've called this special session to address concerns raised about Mr. Terence Walker's residency status. Terence's jaw tightened. Residency status? I own the damn house. I've lived there for 10 years. Karen interjected smoothly, her voice like honey. With all due respect, Terence, you've been gone. The neighborhood felt abandoned. While you traveled, the lawn grew, packages piled up, strangers came and went. The community suffered. I stepped in to preserve the dignity of the property. By breaking in, Terence shot back. By squatting in my bedroom, drinking my wine, parading around like it's yours. The room stirred, some gasps, some murmurs. The board members scribbled notes. Karen lifted her chin, serene. Or by preventing blight, protecting this community's property values, and ensuring safety while the legal owner was absent. The president raised a hand. Mr. Walker, do you have proof of your continued ownership? Terence slid the folder across the table. Deeds, tax receipts, utility bills, all in his name, current, indisputable. Everything you need, he said. She doesn't have a lease, a deed, not even permission. This isn't a debate, it's trespassing. The board members exchanged glances. But before they could respond, Karen leaned forward, voice soft yet commanding. Ownership isn't the only measure, is it? We, as a community, have standards. We expect neighbors to contribute, to be present. He disappeared. I didn't. I've mowed that lawn. I've hosted community breakfasts. I've made this house a home again. A woman on the board nodded. She has been very active these last weeks. We can't ignore that. Terence felt his blood pressure spike. So being active outweighs actual ownership? That's your argument? Karen clasped her hands, feigning sympathy. No one's taking your deed away, Terence. We're simply suggesting that perhaps the HOA should have some oversight regarding how long properties can sit empty before reassignment of caretaking responsibilities. The words chilled him. Reassignment of caretaking responsibilities. A polite phrase, a dangerous precedent. He slammed his hand on the table. This is my house. My property. Not the HOA's. Not yours. And certainly not Karen's. If you think you can legislate theft into legitimacy, you're in for a rude awakening. The president cleared his throat again, clearly uncomfortable. We'll take this under advisement. No decision will be made tonight. Karen leaned back, Victoria's smile tugging at her lips. She had planted doubt, poisoned the soil. As Terence gathered his papers, he knew one thing with certainty. The HOA wasn't just complicit. They were becoming her shield. The courthouse was colder than Terence expected. Its high ceilings and echoing halls seemed designed to make every word, every accusation, linger. He sat at the plaintiff's table, suit pressed, tie straightened, eyes fixed on the judge who would soon decide whether he was a rightful homeowner or a man evicting a neighbor. Across the aisle, Karen looked like she belonged on the cover of a lifestyle magazine. Pastel skirt suit, pearls shining, her posture flawless. She smiled faintly at the jury box, as though they were already old friends. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The judge entered, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense tone. "We're here today to hear the matter of Walker versus Bennett. Allegations of unlawful occupancy, trespassing, and property rights." Karen's attorney stood first, slick and confident. "Your Honor, this case isn't about ownership. Mr. Walker's deed is not in dispute. What is in dispute is his neglect, his abandonment of the property. Ms. Bennett stepped in when the house was left vulnerable. She has been a steward of the home and of the community's interests." "Steward?" Terence muttered under his breath. When his turn came, Terence rose slowly, deliberately. "Your Honor, let's not twist words. This woman broke into my home. She has no lease, no title, no permission. She moved herself into my bedroom and hosted parties in my backyard. Stewardship? No. This is theft." Karen's attorney interjected smoothly. "Mr. Walker has been absent for months. The property appeared abandoned. My client did what any responsible neighbor would, ensured it wasn't vandalized or left to rot." The judge turned to Karen. "Ms. Bennett, is this true? You've been occupying the home?" Karen stood gracefully, clasping her hands. "Yes, Your Honor. But only because I care. This neighborhood has standards. When Mr. Walker disappeared, lawns grew wild, strangers loitered, packages piled up. The HOA was worried. I didn't want the house, or the community, to suffer. I made the sacrifice of moving in. I even maintained utilities at my own expense." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I didn't do it for me. I did it for all of us." The courtroom murmured. Jurors exchanged uneasy glances. Terence's pulse spiked. He forced himself to stay calm. "Your Honor, I have receipts for every bill, every utility. I have flight records showing I was traveling for work, not abandoning my home. And I have photographs, taken before she broke in, of a perfectly maintained property. She didn't protect my home. She exploited my absence." He slid the evidence across the table. The judge flipped through the documents, her expression unreadable. Karen's lawyer shifted, his confidence flickering. But Karen didn't waver. She looked at the jury again, her eyes wet, her voice trembling. "Ask yourself, who truly acted like a neighbor? The man who vanished, or the woman who kept this community safe?" The words hung heavy. For the first time, Terence realized this wasn't just a legal battle. It was a war of perception. And in this courtroom, perception could outweigh truth. The courtroom was silent as the judge shuffled through the last of the documents. Each page turn felt like a drumbeat in Terence's chest. Karen sat poised, hands folded neatly in her lap, the picture of composure. She even smiled faintly, as though she already knew the outcome. The judge finally set the papers aside and looked over her glasses. "I have reviewed the evidence. Let me be clear, this court does not decide popularity contests. We deal in facts. And the facts here are simple." Karen leaned forward slightly, her pearls catching the light. "Mr. Walker," the judge continued, "is the undisputed owner of the property in question. He has presented tax receipts, utility records, and a deed in his name. Ms. Bennett," the judge's voice cooled, "you have presented no lease, no ownership documents, and no legal right to occupancy." A murmur swept through the gallery. Terence's fists unclenched. Karen, however, didn't flinch. She rose smoothly, addressing the court. "Your Honor, I may not have documents, but I have community support. I've lived in that house these past weeks. I've contributed to the neighborhood. That must count for something. The judge's expression hardened. What it counts for, Ms. Bennett, is evidence of trespass. You illegally entered and occupied a residence that is not yours. This court cannot, and will not, legitimize vigilantism disguised as stewardship. For the first time, Karen's smile faltered. The judge banged her gavel. Verdict: full property rights remain with Mr. Walker. Ms. Bennett is to vacate immediately. Furthermore, given the extent of her unlawful occupancy, this matter will be referred to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. The room erupted, gasps, whispers, even a few laughs from those who had watched Karen parade around like queen of the neighborhood. Terence closed his eyes, exhaling relief. It was over. Or so he thought. Because Karen wasn't finished. She shot to her feet, her composure shattering. "This isn't justice," she cried. "I saved that neighborhood while he abandoned it. Without me, the HOA would have fallen apart." Two bailiffs stepped forward as the judge slammed her gavel again. "Order! Ms. Bennett, you will control yourself or be held in contempt." Karen's face twisted into something raw, something feral. She pointed at Terence. "You think you've won? You haven't. The HOA still listens to me. The neighbors know I'm the one who cares. You can't just erase that." The bailiffs escorted her out, her heels clacking sharply against the tile. The sound echoed like the end of an era. Terence gathered his papers, steady now. He had faced down Karen, the HOA's bias, and the courtroom theater, and the truth had held. As he walked out into the sunlight, he realized something deeper. This fight had never been just about a house. It was about control, about dignity, about drawing a line that no one, not even an entitled HOA Karen, could cross. And today, he had drawn it. For the first time in weeks, the mansion felt like his again.